Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Philosophossum. Thank you all for joining me this evening. Hope everyone is enjoying their quarantine, remembering their social distancing and all this and that. Uh, this is the first time I'm trying something new on my channel. This is for the first time I am interviewing another YouTuber. So everybody, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Executioner. Mr. Executioner, thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, everybody.
Right, right. So
Thank you very much.
not a problem. So, anyways, if you're real quick, you just kind of I can tell that you're another libertarian YouTuber. If you could kind of briefly explain sort of what your political views are.
Well, I lean very libertarian. I am libertarian, but I kind of have leanings everywhere, to be honest. I have kind of anarcho individualist leanings, some egoist leanings, Rothbard leanings, and I kind of take my philosophy from everywhere. I personally believe that a state infringing on somebody's right, I think that a state in general infringing on everybody's rights is a bad thing. I think that just people are sovereign individuals and that they should be able to live their lives how they see fit. And if some people want to come together voluntarily to form a community, like, I don't know, a Hoppian community or whatever, that's their own thing. If communists want to have their own commune, that's their own thing. But just don't infringe on my right to have my own land and my own life.
Right, right. You sound similar to my point of view. I'm a panarchist, so I'm sort of the opinion that everyone should be able to just pick their own political system. So, like, socialists can have their own commune. The anarchists can opt out of government. Minarchists can experiment with their own small government. See if it works. I take a very live and let live type of attitude to politics, but that's just me though. So, anyways, I've so what's your background as far as like getting involved on YouTube? What's sort of you have this whole channel here. I've seen you do videos with Esoteric Entity before, stuff like that. So what sort of got you involved on YouTube and with the whole YouTube anarchist libertarian community?
Well, I didn't start out as an anarchist. I actually started out on the alt right. To actually
Oh,
be
so
frank, I started in 2016. I was in high school at the time, and I wanted to create a YouTube channel because I had seen a lot of the over political correctness that was going on during the Trump election. Actually, the 2016 election, I like to call it the Trump election. But I noticed that a lot of the people around me were very left leaning. I was very left leaning at the time. I was a fan of Kyle Kalinske and Bernie
oh
Sanders,
dear
but then I
lord.
kind of got out of that. Yes, I was cringe, but I got out
Yes.
of that and I kind of leaned towards the Republican side. Initially, growing up, I was very Republican. Then I kind of, in middle school, took a thing down towards the left in middle school, but because of Kyle Kalinske. But I kind of went into a different direction in high school. I went more um, right, then I kind of went to libertarianism after kind of listening to Ayn Rand. She is not a libertarian as a lot of people like to say,
I know.
but
There should
I
be like some
found
kind of Ayn
I
Rand
found
drinking game, like Ayn Rand, Ayn Rand.
yeah, 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 basically. But I initially started out with content like making fun of who was that I think it was like Milo or Riley Dennis and that whole gang I
Oh
started
yeah,
out with. I
Milo
kind
Yiannopoulos and his whole crowd.
Well, not that. I'm trying to think of the name. It was that non-binary person. That non-binary. Uh,
That
it
that
was
whole
the
crowd.
everybody was academics like suit yourself. I was in the suit yourself crowd. I
Yeah.
was in the first collaboration I ever did was with believe it was a guy by the name of Nomad. I believe I did a collab with him, but I did a collab around 2016. Then I wanted to get my avatar redone because initially mine kind of looked like an executioner, but it kind of looked like a Klansman a little
Yeah,
bit. So
right.
I kind
Yeah,
of wanted to.
might
I
send
kind of
mixed
wanted to
messages there.
get
Yeah,
rid of that one in case somebody from my school saw and thought,
thought
"Oh,
you
he
were
must be a cross."
hanging out with that crowd. Yeah,
Yeah, so I got it. So there was this person I came across, Mr. Dapperton. I came
yeah.
across initially, and I really enjoyed the Avatar. And I was like, "Hey, that's cool. Can I look into that?" And he gave me the link to the artist, and I really delved more into libertarianism. After that, I kind of went to Esoteric Entity, which I did a collab with him. What my second collab was with Esoteric Entity back around 2017, 2018 on a Kyle Kalinske
I
video
actually
on
was it the one involving socialism, social democracy, and capitalism. Can you get capitalism? You can have capitalism and socialism. Was it that one?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
I
was
started out with the yeah, it was the video where it was trying
Scandinavia.
to
I just watched that
basically
one.
it was Kyle saying that individuals have not really accomplished much or whatever, and that
Like
or
that's
whatever. And I found that
yeah. I actually the funny thing is when earlier when you mentioned you used to be a fan of Kyle Kalinske, I thought that was funny because earlier today I just watched that video where you collabed with Esoteric Entity, and you guys like ripped him a new asshole. Like you devoured his bullshit.
yeah. The thing is, in my earlier work, I never wrote things down. I never went by a script, so I would just go on one part of the
Right.
video and I would just say what I had to say. Then I learned afterwards, hey, maybe I should write this down and yeah, after that, I kind of went more script oriented.
Right.
But a lot of the videos, that collaboration I did with Esso was, it was very interesting because I hadn't read into a lot of libertarianism yet. I was fresh into, I believe I had just got The Road to Serfdom by Hayek or whatever. I had just started reading that. And I really was not on the A game of things. I was really going, if I had to be frankly honest, I really was repeating talking points, but they from other people, but it was trying to get things into my own words, but I was like trying to find my place and where I wanted to go with the channel.
Right. I know you mentioned that you started off not really using scripts. I'm gonna be honest with you. I never really use scripts for my videos just because I feel like it's kind of extra work, like having to sit there and type out everything. I usually just kind of record as I go. What
Yeah,
I'll do is I'll make a list of like bullet points. Like, okay, here are points I want to mention. Like, I'll prepare like a brief outline of what it is I want to touch on, but then kind of at you know use the exact phrase, not figure out the exact phrasing as I go. So that's kind of my strategy, but to each his own.
yeah, that was kind of. I kind of do a hybrid system of that, and I kind of do the script. Then when I screw up in the middle of it, I just keep going, and
Right.
I just find a way to make it, which has always been kind of the way I've done things. Is in that way, I had started out production value wise, I was really trying to keep good, but I had VLC editor. I don't know how the hell I got it, but I managed to get it, and I worked on that for a bit. Then I was like, maybe I should use like Sony Movie Studio or whatever, like something related to Vegas, and that just improved everything from that. I met Shane Killian though, and he gave me some great advice on video editing and stuff like that, and that really helped out with the production and stuff like that. I had worked at a grocery store, and I had saved up $160 for a microphone, an Audio Technica 2020 microphone, and that's how I was recording on a Snowball microphone. Then I switched to Audio Technica, and I can tell you, it's huge difference. But yeah, I started out on YouTube very weird because I started out very left leaning in school. Then I went to kind of the center, kind of like the David Pakman sort of thing. Then I
David
kind of went
Pakman.
into the alt right. And
Yeah.
then I'm just like, maybe I should read what the libertarians are doing. And I'm like, well, this makes a whole lot more sense than what those other bastards are trying to push.
Yeah, that's kind of the same thing. I had a similar experience. Sort of getting involved with libertarianism. Actually, I grew up in a conservative family my whole life. Our family leans very right, so I was kind of introduced to sort of criticism of like taxation and regulations and things like that from the onset. But I sort of figured out that because I was one of those people who were guilty of like lumping together conservatives and libertarians. There's when you really look at it, it's like they're they use different rationales for what they believe. Like the conservatives are like they're against taxes because they want to keep more of their money, where libertarians are against taxes because of fundamental property rights. So it's like it's like they agree with a lot of the same conclusions, but they use different rationales to approach them, and I feel like that's what a lot of people are kind of missing when they compare conservatives and libertarians. Among other things, of course, but it's probably one of the bigger ones.
Yeah, that was yeah, that kind of describes kind of snapping back. It reminds me of a lot of back then. I grew up in a conservative family and Republican, and it really was. I went from Republican to Democrat, back to Republican. Then I kind of went down the Sargon route and the alt right and all that,
Man, you've
whatever.
been all over
Then
the
I
you've
was
been all over
just
the political spectrum.
yeah, it's interesting. When I've had a interest in politics and history since I was I believe 7. I believe I used to go to the library all the time and read about wars and books and stuff like that. Usually I didn't read; I just look at the pictures. But then I
Right.
would just be like, there's a cool paragraph here or whatever, and I started reading that and whatever.
Oh,
And
there's words that go
when
with
I
these
was a young kid,
pictures. Ah.
yeah, but I was really into history when I was younger, and that's something I went into for a while. I, I've moved around quite a bit, and I've kind of noticed things like I've moved to one area that was very conservative, then I moved to another area that was very liberal, and I kind of noticed that, so it kind of was like whatever. I used to get picked on for being a conservative when I was like 8 or 9 or whatever, when people didn't even know what the hell
Yeah.
that was, and you know, I really had interests beyond my years, to be honest,
I can
and it was
sympathize.
yeah, and it was just I kind of had to. I lost it for a bit because, like, lost that interest because I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to relate to what all the other kids are relating to. Oh, the new Call of Duty came out or whatever. But I always was the loudmouth in the class that would always speak my opinion, and if they didn't like it, tough shit.
Right. Yeah, because I noticed that.
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish.
but yeah, over time I kind of grew more political. Kind of, I explored a lot, and I think that's really helped me come to where I am today.
Right, because I can kind of sympathize with that whole, idea of having interests beyond your age or time or whatever. I remember when I was 12, I was doing like trigonometry and calculus problems, like not even for homework, just for the fun of it, and everyone was like, "Oh, this guy's doing math for fun. He must be weird."
Yeah, that's yeah, that happens. I was actually called Captain Encyclopedia Britannica. That was my nickname for a very long. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I just I always got used to get in trouble, especially in high school. Like one story I like to tell is there was this teacher, not going to name his name, but I used to correct him all the time, and he used to get so pissed. And this was like freshman, sophomore year when I was getting out of liberal, like the left or whatever, and I was just like, "You do realize that debt is not a good thing." Blah blah blah. And he goes, "Well, temporarily it's a good thing." And I go, "Well, I can see your point there, but you do realize that." Things get out of control when you don't have accountability and stuff like that. And it was just so interesting. It was just issues from the Civil War all the way up to the Great Depression. I would always fight with him about, and it was just awesome. But it led to a lot of like kids bullying me and crap. So I'm just like,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
I don't even care.
Yeah. Kids are douchebags. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, that's the thing I've noticed about public schools in general is that I understand where they're coming from. They don't want the class to drag out indefinitely. Some classes, like math, which I hated, I had the same exact attitude. But I really just wanted to say what I was so passionate about it that I kind of lost sight of like everybody else. But in general, and it was just I would talk to some teachers, and there was one who said who would blow by the subject very quickly and not even explain it to people. And he said to me that, "Oh, these kids don't understand it or whatever. These kids don't are not intelligent to understand this or whatever." And I'm like, "Then why skip by it so fast? Like,
Right.
even if they make the class interesting."
Exactly. And we could really we could even do a video on this, just how like shitty public school is. Because public school is shitty in just about every way. Like it's boring as fuck. It's always underfunded. They do jack shit to protect you from bullies. The curriculums are so dry and irrelevant. Like we could probably do a whole just video dedicated to discussing everything wrong with public education.
Yeah, it's the thing. I yeah, I grew up in Boston. I grew up in like kind of like the Boston area, but I was born in Boston, but I kind of grew up in the Massachusetts area, and it was very interesting to me to see there were West Massachusetts was very conservative. It was very rural, but in the east, near Boston, and if you go towards Nantucket in like Providence Town and stuff like that, it was very Democrat, very liberal, and it was just an interesting experience to just see all that. And like, I'm no longer living in Mass. I'm living way up north, but yeah, I growing up, it was very weird to be in a very liberal state but have very independent conservative leanings.
Right. Yeah, it's like it's like when you're everyone around you's always talking about being liberal and you're conservative. I can imagine the feeling, especially like when you realize like you just see you just look around you, you see all the policies that are going on with like the homeless. Some areas that are super liberal, you'll see like a lot of homeless, a lot of vagrancy, a lot of stuff like that, because like these dipshits implement these policies like welfare and stuff that they think will help, and it doesn't. It's like you're ripping your hair out because it's like you
Yeah,
want to just say, "Hey, dumbasses, this shit isn't working." You know what I mean?
that the thing about it is I was very vocal on drug policy in general. When I was in high school, I really was saying like I was saying, look, and I grew up in an area where there were a lot of deaths from heroin and stuff like that. But I said, look, like this was when I transitioned to libertarianism. I said, look, if you make these things illegal, you're just going to create more demand for them. And it is sad people are dying from heroin, and it is sad people are dying from opioids. But if you really want to change that, you get rid of the criminal element of it all and just treat it as either a medical thing, or just treat it as people do what they want to do. Just don't get behind the wheel while shooting up on heroin or whatever, you know? Keep on your damn property. Don't do it near me. And I'm I'm fine with people doing whatever.
Yeah, that's the thing. If we had more of a libertarian approach to dealing with drug issues, we'd probably see more of like better rehab, better types of addiction treatment, because that's really what helps. When you make drugs legal, like we learned this in the 1920s when they made alcohol illegal, it increases the anyone with even a basic understanding of economics will know that getting rid of the supply without getting rid of the demand is just going to increase the value. You're making it more valuable. You're incentivizing, if anything, you're incentivizing people to provide it. That's Econ 101, and these people, it's like it's basic economics. We saw it firsthand in the 1920s. Fast forward to today, we still have people on both sides. We have Republicans saying get rid of drugs. You have Democrats saying get rid of guns. And it's like we know what happens when you ban things. We know firsthand banning stuff doesn't get rid of it. More often than not, it does the opposite. And like people just don't want to learn.
Yeah, that's the thing about it is you're sweeping it under the rug. And a bunch of times we used to the area I lived in, the every Friday used to be free needles, like I believe it was a business, I believe it was a pharmacy or whatever, it was sponsored by the state or whatever, and they would hand out free needles and crap like that. But I was against that personally because look, I don't want any of the tax money um, going towards anything, whether it's pro drug or anti drug. I
Yeah.
think that it should just be neutral on that. Like it, and there were a bunch of freaking needles all over the ground in my town, and it was funny because I would call the police and I would say, "Hey, there are needles on the ground. Can you come and get them?" And the 911 operator said, "Well, that's not our issue, or that's not our concern, or whatever." When I was like, "Dude, somebody could walk on this and get pricked by a needle. Like,
Right.
are you not serious?"
And
So
and
whatever.
they're
That's when I realized that communities are just like the idea of like government in general was just getting way out of hand. It had no interest in protecting its citizens.
right. And if you think about it, like needles aren't the types of things that you would just haphazardly walk out and pick up. Like it's not like candy wrappers or soda cans. It's like this was inside somebody's body, making contact with somebody's blood and who the fuck knows what. Like it's not something I just be like, oh, I'll go out and touch it and pick it up. Yeah.
Yeah, but over in California, there were a couple instances where needles were found in like sandboxes where children were
Oh,
playing,
that's nasty.
and and yeah, my concern was more, hey, if these things don't have caps on them, then this is just going to be like if I'm walking down the street and I don't notice it or whatever, and it's on the ground facing like where it could pierce my shoe, I'm just like, yeah, man, that's my issue with drug users and stuff like that. I go, look, you can do your drugs, just don't leave the needles lying around because somebody could get hurt, and that's a violation of the NAP right there.
Right, and if I'm kind of surprised that the I'm not sure what town or community you lived in. That when you you basically called the cops, told them, hey, there's fucking biological waste all over the place. Can we maybe get some help here? And the cops said, nope, not our problem. I'm not sure what town that was
Well,
in.
the silver lining behind it is that the the actual cops. I actually knew a couple of police officers, and
Right.
they actually I was just at my house or whatever, and pulled up and they asked me, "Hey, who was it that you were talking on the phone with?" And I go, "Well, it was blah blah blah." And they go, "Well, we're gonna put them on disciplinary leave and shit like
Okay,
that."
good. So,
So in the end, they did have accountability,
right,
but I'm just like, this wouldn't happen if just everything was privatized.
right. Because here's the thing: I'm not super anti-cop. Like I know some. I know a lot of police officers, both with my local police department and in the Maryland State Police, and I know a lot of cops who go out of their way to do things to help the community. So I'm not anti-cop, but I do agree that generally there'd probably be better. The system would probably be better off in the hands of the private sector versus the government. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and what I found out was cops are technically in my state supposed to do that. If they see needles on the ground or whatever, they have a sharps bin, they have gloves, and they're supposed to pick them up if they get a call or whatever. And it was because of one person that it didn't get done automatically, which, in my opinion, just goes to show when you have a public utility, it's really up to people inside of the public utility on whether they go, maybe, well, do I really give a crap or not to inform my higher up about this? Versus a private company, if you were to go on the news and say, oh, this private company wouldn't do it or whatever, people would be like, oh, that's a crappy private company. I'm not going to call them or whatever for
Right.
my security.
Because we can imagine how it'd be handled differently if it was a private company. You'd have a security firm can be monitoring the area. They patrol the area. They'd see the needles, probably pick them up automatically. Not only that, but they'd probably be like, okay, there's a pattern of needles reoccurring in this area. Let's set up some surveillance and try to catch the sick fuck who keeps leaving them here. That if it was a private sector,
Yeah,
yeah,
and yeah, I totally. It's just very interesting how it's just interesting how like you observe things in your own community, and if you apply some of the things you learn in libertarianism to it, you realize, hey, a lot of the no matter how big a government is, there's always going to be a little bit of corruption. Now, if you take people are in for self-interest and they will abuse some things, but if you use it in a private way, like a laissez-faire free market way, and you take and incentivize people to use that self-interest in a way to not only make money for themselves but to benefit other people and serve others, that's a way better alternative than just having a community that's just, oh, you have a town because it's for the greater good.
right. Well, I think there's you could make an argument, I guess, for certain things being provided community wide might be beneficial, but generally speaking, I think privatization usually results in the
Yeah,
best. Yeah,
I have no problem in voluntary communities
right,
like covenant communities, covenants, and stuff like that. But I have an issue with having a state community, like state enforced community.
right. I've had this discussion before with people, sort of what makes where you draw the line exactly between like a community and a state, or like how or like uh, the I'm not really I don't really identify as anarchist strictly speaking, just because I'm not like anti-government. I'm more I'm more like government agnostic. Like whether or not government exists isn't really a big deal to me, as long as if government exists but it's not infringing on anybody's rights, I don't have a problem. If it doesn't exist, then oh
Yeah,
well. So that's kind of my
it
position.
says it's kind of like Shane Killian. He had a good position on this. He kind of said, take what you think government does. That's good. Be it the services like, I don't know, roads, fire department, whatever, and you make it so it's voluntary as opposed to non-voluntary.
Right. That's more or less the opinion I have. Like I for a while I identified as a minarchist because I was like, hey, I want government to exist, but only do things voluntarily. And of course, the common counter argument to that is, well, if it does things voluntarily, then it's not a government. And but I think Shane made the point best that it's largely a semantic issue. It comes down to sort of where you draw the line. And Robert Nozick makes this point in his book, Anarchy, State, and Utopia, that there's sort of a Sorties paradox. If you have a business, how close to government can it get before it becomes government, right? And that's kind of how he argued for
Yeah,
minarchism. So to me, the distinction between anarchism and minarchism is mostly like a semantic one, the definition of government. I mostly just so to kind of keep the issue on point, to keep it. I identify as a voluntarist and a libertarian. I just say I believe the initiation of force is wrong, and I believe that all interactions should be voluntary. Now, if you want an organization that does government type things and you want to call it government, fine, knock yourself out. But if it's voluntary, if there's no violation of rights, then I really don't. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. That's sort of the position I take. But
yeah, I take that position too. I like to look at many different ways of arguing for things. I am a lot of people are natural law people. A lot of people are first principle people. I think that's the same thing, but a lot of people are different. But I like to take the ideas. I like to argue from a utilitarian standpoint sometimes, where I argue that it's not like utilitarianism as everybody thinks it is. It's utilitarianism in the way that, okay, if there wasn't a state and things were and things were more voluntary, people would be more happier because they could choose who they wanted to associate with, and there wouldn't be a state per- perpetuating misery onto a populace, And I take that thing, and a lot of people counter that by saying that the utilitarian libertarians, if you read New Liberty by Murray Rothbard, great book, he argues that if the utilitarian libertarians, oh my God, is that a long mouth droll? But
so yeah, say it 3 times fast. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, he argues that if you're utilitarian and a libertarian, you could argue that a community wanting to kill redheads or whatever would be totally okay, but really it wouldn't be, because if you look at the idea of happiness, it's totally subjective. If you were to look at it, the redheads aren't having a good time; they're being miserable. Like
Right.
it isn't. If I was a redhead and I was seeing all my friends getting killed, I wouldn't be that happy.
Exactly. Yeah, because that's sort of the idea behind the hedonistic calculus that Bentham and Mill propose. That it's not just the people you're affecting directly; their indirect effect has to be taken into account, and that's why utilitarianism, if you really take it to its logical conclusion, doesn't draw these macabre conclusions that people think it does. And another thing I want to point out is that a lot of people they view like deontological ethics and utilitarianism as like two completely separate, mutually exclusive theories of ethics that are like not compatible with each other at all. Where I think that's a bit inaccurate. I think, realistically speaking, a practical theory of ethics kind of combines both a deontological rights-based approach and a utilitarianism, what is the best results approach. Because if you think about it, life is kind of like that. Like we need a standard. It's like Kant was right when he said like we need some sort of basic standard that can apply equally to everybody. So he across the board, but also there is that sort of practicality, reality aspect to it as well. And I think that's why if you really want a system of ethics that's practical that'll work, you kind of need to combine deontological and utilitarianism, approaches. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's I have that. I have a very similar view in that regard, and a lot of people when they start talking about what justifies property, a lot of people go from the deontological side of things. I like to go from multiple perspectives on each issue, and I don't like arguing just from one, because if you argue just from one, that really, I like to keep my mind sharp on some things, because if I always argue from a deontological perspective, then I'm going to fall into some type of complacency type thing where I'm just going to repeat the same talking points, as opposed to, oh, I never thought about it from, I don't know, an egoist point of view or a utilitarian point of view or whatever. I could use all those, mix them together, and come up with my own brand.
Right, and then you can really approach the same issue from any different number of, I guess, ethical frameworks. Like the same issue can be approached from a deontological standpoint, or a utilitarian standpoint, or a virtue-based standpoint. It's like there's usually overlap between them. And one thing
Yeah,
I always found useful as far as like utilitarianism goes is like if you think about deontology really doesn't go that far as an ethical framework. Like it kind of tells us what we can't do. Like if you look at Immanuel Kant's his categorical imperative, it tells us what we can't do. Like you can't interfere with other people's rights. You can't use other people, right? But it kind of leaves the whole. There's the side of ethics of it's like here's what I can't do, and there's a side of ethics where here's what I should do. And I think deontology is that
it,
side of ethics that okay, here's the things I can't do, and utilitarianism was that side of ethics like okay, here's what I should within the category of things that I can do, what should I do? And again, I think that's why it's important to sort of
yeah,
combine the two approaches.
it's like deontology is the foundation, and if you're going to build your philosophy, you have to build it upwards versus just having. I've seen a lot of ANCAP YouTubers just go with deontology, and the problem with that, I think, is that it gets it not only gets boring after a while, just hearing the same thing over and over again. It's kind of like listening to a Joker speech from the Dark Knight, to be honest. But it just doesn't appeal to new people. And if you always base your catalog on, um, we are arguing from deontological views on why taxation is wrong, why property is right, and a whole bunch of things, people are just going to be like, it's like I've watched this video before.
Right, and that's why I feel like everyone kind of approaches the non-aggression principle from a strictly deontological point of view. When you can, there's plenty of utilitarian justifications for it as well. Like I think property is very utilitarian. Like the idea that okay, there's resources out there, there's not enough resources for everybody. How do we figure out who gets what, right? So there's a very practical side to the concept of property.
Yeah, and it's just, I've looked at certain things, and there are some things where people can use utilitarianism for good, and they can use it for things that make absolutely no sense. It's like the whole idea of, we should harvest the organs of homeless people or whatever, when if you look at that, you can use utilitarianism to debunk that very assertion, because okay, I'm going to be removing this homeless person's organs so I can help many others. well, there's a whole bunch of homeless people out there. The majority of them have organs. Well, it isn't going to be very happy for them at the end of the day. It's it's kind of like you can use it against each other, and that's a useful thing. It's useful, but it's like confusing.
Right, because it's like you have to take everything, and I guess that's one of the problems with utilitarianism. It's like there's no way you can really predict the outcome that an action will have. It kind of you kind of have to have for utilitarianism to work. Like you kind of have to perfectly, you have to have like a crystal ball or some way to know like, okay, this is the full extent to which this action will affect people or everybody, and uh, I mean, so for practicality's sake, you kind of have to generalize on some specific things, but I mean, as a general rule of thumb, I think it's not terrible.
Yeah, it's how I look at it is it's about adapting it to be at least consistent, but it's using it on a smaller scale instead of the larger scale that a lot of people like to do. Because if you look at it on always from a large scale, if you look at it from the large scale on the thing, if you look at it from the large scale of harvesting this to help everybody else, if you look at it very smaller, it's less inconsistent because if you apply it very broadly, you come into things where it's like, oh, but this group is going to conflict with another. And I guess the phrase, you can't make everyone happy, kind of summarizes a lot of it.
Yeah, that's just kind of the reality of things. That's at the end of the day, it's like there's only so much you can do, and everybody has their own unique needs and wants. It's just not practical to make everybody happy. So you need to make sacrifices. That's kind of what society is.
Yeah, and I kind of, from unique positions like property, I like to look at it from utilitarian, but I like Max Stirner's take on it, where he was. A lot of people like to meme him, but the thing is, if you read it, I believe on page 264, or I think it was 270 to 271 of The Unique in Its Own by Max Stirner, it reads, I believe he was. A lot of people like to say that he said this quote that property only exists because it is legal fiction. Well, that was Proudhon's idea of it, not Stirner's, but Stirner debunks that very idea by saying that, look, property in part is your ability to defend something that is yours. Just because you have something in your possession does not necessarily mean it is property. It's when you take the initiative to declare something as yours and you've acquired it ethically that it is truly property. It's like if you can take a Lockean perspective on it, where on the idea of homesteading, where you put up your property boundaries or whatever. If you put up your property boundaries and you defend it, then you could argue that from a Stirner point of view, that becomes property. And he actually said a very good quote that about communists. He disagreed with communists very much, and he said that um, if the communists want a community or whatever, and everybody, the property belongs to everyone or whatever, I will not view it as that way because I am the property owner of what I have, basically. And I will defend that and I will rebel against anyone who tries to take that away from me. And I think that looking at it from that, it's kind of a weird it's kind of a weird gem you can bring back from the 1840s, way before we really had a before libertarianism really took off. It really, you can find things that are just so interesting you never think about it like that.
Right, and all the different perspectives on libertarian. Like, there's people often say libertarianism is, right leaning or conservative, but there's plenty of libertarians on the left as well. There's libertarians who are like there's libertarian socialists and libertarian communists. Then that's the thing. If you don't think it's okay to hurt people, if you don't think it's okay to initiate force, you're a libertarian. If you can support things like the left, they want to help the poor, or they want to support gun safety. You can do those things without or support the environment. You can do those things without initiating force against people, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, that's where I kind of lean on many things, and it's if I can bring this. Sorry about that. I am just I have to switch over the hotkey for my voice because it keeps wanting to go down the page.
right,
Alrighty, so there's a quote I want to bring up, and it's by Stirner. It's actually a pretty good one. In short, the property question can't be solved as amicably as the socialists and indeed even the communists dreamed. It will only be solved in the war of all against all. The poor only become free, and the property owner and the poor only become free, and the property owners become free when they rebel and rise up. Who, however much one bestows on them, they will still always want more because they want nothing less than that finally nothing more gets bestowed. And end quote, 270 to 271, Max Stirner, unique in itself. But I think that quote can be applied to the state in many ways because the only way things truly become property, like in a free society, is when people finally say enough is enough and they do rise up. And I think that we are seeing that more and more with the libertarian movement growing. And I think that in the next 10 years, I wouldn't say five or one, like some of the agorists are saying that the state will collapse. I think that there's a chance it could collapse, but I'm not going to say it's a guarantee. But
right,
I think that people will finally realize, hey, we need to get the government more out of our lives and move towards a more free society.
right. Well, here's the thing that the government is their days are kind of numbered with Bitcoin and other forms of cryptocurrency. Like, there's no way the IRS can track that. So as soon as people realize, oh hey, I can uh, tell the tax people to fuck off or tell the tax people, regulators, all kinds of government people, I can work around them through Bitcoin and do business more efficiently this way. It's only a matter of time before the government is either history or has to kind of adapt. That's the thing. A lot of agorists argue that doing business around the state will get rid of it. Not necessarily. There's a possibility the state could adapt. How likely that is of to and how likely that is of happening is up for debate, but it is a possibility.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Agorists are very interesting. They have a interesting point of view of things, but I would like to say things. Cryptocurrency, it is cool, but there are some that are better than others, like Monero and stuff like that. But Bitcoin, it is very interesting because you can find out through a little bit of detective work who traded with who based on the amounts traded, which wallets and addresses and stuff like that. It's just the government would be willing to do that sort of work to track down those sort of things,
Right.
but individuals probably wouldn't. But it really is Bitcoin. I believe I read a story about 10,000 people got audited by the IRS because of Bitcoin, and because they were using centralized wallets and stuff like that. And even with decentralized wallets, there is a chance that it is trackable, and that's been confirmed by many people. I've talked to Shane Killian about this, and a whole bunch of people, and it's a very broad misconception that a lot of some libertarian pundits bring up, that Bitcoin is untraceable. Well, it is, and it kind of isn't. There are caveats. You got to know what you're doing.
Right. I'd imagine if you know, it's based because I work in IT, so I have some background in like cybersecurity, and I know specifically Bitcoin uses something called a hash function, which is a I know you said you're not really the math savvy type person, but basically a hash function is like a one-way mathematical function. Like once you like, there's no possible way to take the output and work back to the original value, and that's sort of the idea behind uh, Bitcoin and what makes it virtually untraceable. Now, there are, if you really wanted to, there are ways to trace Bitcoin, but it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it is a pain in the ass. Like I work in I don't really work on the math side of IT, but I kind of I repair computers, and
Oh,
I
cool.
kind of I took a lot of cybersecurity courses in high school and stuff like that. I have certifications in it, and
Yeah, me too.
the thing is, I look at it as you don't want to have everything in one basket. That's why I buy silver, I buy some gold and
Right.
stuff like that. I like those because if I really wanted to, I could go out in the middle of the woods, bury it, and I would be the only one who would know where it is. Versus crypto, where there have been instances where people have been robbed, people have been
Yeah.
defrauded,
Yep.
and a whole bunch of things. And it's just the security aspect. It's kind of like you're we're trying to improve the security, but there are always flaws kind of hindering that. But I think that for the most part, crypto is a very promising technology.
Right. Actually, interesting story. I wanted to get involved with crypto. I think back about back in I think it was it September, October. I was starting to get interested in crypto, and I went on Amazon. I bought a little like flash drive Bitcoin miner that you plug in your USB port, and it mines Bitcoin through the USB port. And I'm like, oh, this will be cool. And the funny thing is, it was a lot louder than I expected it to be. Because if you look at the thing, it's a little thumb drive thing. It's really not that big. But holy shit, is it loud? Like there's no like I can't. There's no way I can like run it in my bedroom.
Yeah, that's the thing, and also the things to consider for people like buying cryptocurrency is one thing, because and that really isn't that high risk. It actually is, but if you look at mining it, for example, a smart thing to do would be having solar panels to save down on electricity costs and stuff like that. That's a very smart idea. But if somebody just wants to take their old laptop, for example, and just mine Bitcoin, it's not as profitable as it used to be.
Right.
But things like Litecoin and uh, lighter cryptocurrencies that you can actually do that with, it really isn't that bad. It's just Bitcoin has gone to the point where it takes it takes more than your standard old computer to
To actually mine, yeah.
basically make a difference.
Because there's like Litecoin can be mined on a regular computer. I think Electronium is a one that you can mine that on a smartphone.
Yeah, it's just it depends on it just depends on a lot of things. And I remember when Bitcoin first came out around 2013, I believe 2014, I wanted to get into it. I wanted to get into it and I wanted to buy into it, but I didn't end up doing it, and then it went to 17 grand, and I'm like, ah, shit, I sort of went into that, but yeah, the thing about it is I've seen it go from a older computers you can mine it to hey, we need to have better CPUs to oh, you really need a bunch of graphics cards to do it. Now it's just hey, we built this simple machine right here that only does that one task of mining it. I think it's an ASIC miner or whatever.
Right.
And that's it's just very interesting how it's gone down it's down that path.
Right. And then there's options like stock. I also tried getting into stock as well. That's another option for if investments.
Yeah, that's the thing about stock and some things in regards to financial security it's a tricky bet, but my grandfather was in the stock market. He actually only had a fifth grade education, believe it or not. He dropped out of school to help his parents on the farm and whatever. But kind of it, it's one of those things where he taught me about that. It is about buying and investing into it, but you really have to have a mind oriented towards that sort of thing. It's like it's just very looking back it's very interesting. Like the thing about gold the thing about gold and silver and all those things is that they're very useful because they're actually tangible things that you can have in your possession versus things like silver certificates and silver bonds, where those things you don't want to go with because you don't have the physical product there. And if it goes under, there's really a lot of issues with getting your gold or getting your silver or getting those things. And crypto solves it in a bit of a way where it's going to be in your wallet no matter what. But still, you always got to have a connection to the internet, power, or depends on the cryptocurrency where you can send it via phones, but still that requires electricity. But or you could do a hard wallet, but then you have to plug it into a computer and actually do that sort of thing. So it's very interesting. I've heard some people claim that crypto doesn't require electricity. Well, to mine it, it does, and to trade some of it, it does. So it's just very interesting.
Right. So we are coming up on an hour. Did you want to keep going, or did you want to kind of end it? Pick up later.
Yeah, we could pick up.
You prefer to pick up the conversation another time?
Yeah,
Yeah, just
yep,
because it's getting late. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time,
yeah, it's
Mr.
getting late.
Executioner. Thank you for coming on the show. I'll be sure when I upload this, I'll be sure to put a link to your channel in the description. Also, feel free to download and re-upload it on your channel. Also, anyone watching this,
Thank you.
if you guys want to come on my show for an interview, feel free to hit me up. And interview, debate, whatever, feel free to hit me up. And also, since I saw your video where you debunk Kyle Kalinske with ESO, I thought that was brilliant. I'm looking into debunking some of his videos, so maybe we could do a collab of something like that.
Yeah, totally. Whenever I'm free or you're free, that would.
Right. Yeah, cool. All right, well, I'll be sure to hit you up again. Thanks everybody for watching. Be sure to check out Executioner's channel. Link will be in the description. This has been Philosophossum, making stupidity play dead. Have a good one. That's all I know my videos.
Have